Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 447, and my guest is Lisa Campion. Lisa uses a combination of intuition, energy healing Reiki, and therapeutic techniques as a psychic counselor. Born with the ability to see and hear what others couldn't, she spent the first part of her life trying to hide it from the outside world until a chance encounter with a guiding light and a few scary movies changed how she saw herself and her place in the world. She's also the author of several books, and by a weird coincidence, I recognized her name when her PR people reached out to me, and I thought, why do I know this person's name? And I have one of her books. What are the chances of that? Pretty interesting. Anyway, lovely conversation. Really enjoyed talking with Lisa. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Hey Human Podcast is on YouTube under official Susan Ruth. I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism. My TikTok and Instagram is Susan Ruthism. You can check out susanruth.com to learn about me and my other artistic endeavors. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you get your music. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on Apple, iHeart, and Spotify podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening. Be well, be kind, be love, and here we go. Lisa Campion, welcome to Hey Human.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Tell me where you grew up. You're in Rhode Island now, correct?
Yeah, I'm in Rhode Island now, but I grew up just outside of Boston, born in the 60s to very hippie parents. And it was really good that I had super hippie parents because I was born very psychic. So I was one of those, like, I'd see dead people kids, and grew up in a really, really haunted house. And really, different world back then. There were, it was really hard to be a psychic child. I had to hide what I was experiencing. I was seeing spirits. I was seeing colors around people. I would just sort of know things. And my parents were like, "Oh, Lisa, you have such a good imagination." I mean, they didn't drag me to the church and throw holy water on me, which I'm really grateful for that. But, I was like, what's happening? Why can't nobody else is experiencing this? And what's it all mean? What am I supposed to do with it? So I spent the first 20 years of my life trying to figure out how to turn it off and also pretend to be normal in public, which I'm good at sometimes, but not always, So that's kind of my strange story.
I imagine, East Coast, that's a lot of death.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Boston's an old city, and the house I lived in was like 150 years old, and they're just seen a lot of life and a lot of death.
Mm-hmm. Were there any spirit or ghosts and whatever you want to call it that were particularly entranced by a child who could see them? Did you have any favorites? Did you have any that were no bueno?
There are some of both. So when I was really little, I called them the gray people. And I just wake up in the middle of the night and they'd be these gray people around me. And I knew they were sad or they were curious. And I knew that if I talked to them, they would, if I listened to them really, they would feel better. So it was like 5 years old and doing like ghost therapy in my bedroom, My favorite was one called Charlie. And he just told me his name was Charlie. He was there the whole time. My other favorite was actually, and this is sort of a funny part of the story, a poignant part of the story, is that the reason that I was psychic in the first place is that I had a twin brother who died in utero. And you know how like twinsies are connected like psychically, so when he died, it's actually my very first memory ever is his passing, which I think happened probably around 14 weeks of gestation. And it's weird to think you can remember something that happened when you were just a tiny little bundle of cells, but I swear that I do. And that, he went over to the other side and my psychic connection carried with him. So it put me in a very strange position of understanding and experiencing death before I even knew life. That's, I think, why I was born psychic. I know that's why I was born psychic. And so my very favorite imaginary friend was my brother, 4 years old or something. And my mom, she was like, "Who are you talking to, honey?" I was talking to him. And I was like, "Oh, Mom, I'm talking to my dead brother, William." I remember she was holding this glass and she dropped the glass and the glass shattered everywhere. And she like ran screaming out of the room, like, you know, and my dad's name was Bill. Everyone called him Bill, but his name was William. And I know if my parents had had a son, they would have called him William. I didn't know that when I was 4. I know that, now. So I think that was sort of my favorite, was Charlie the ghost and my brother William, who was my imaginary friend for my whole childhood.
I often wonder about the kids who speak of imaginary friends, if in fact they're seeing ghosts or imprints.
Ghosts, imprints, spirit guides, angels. I think we all have a spirit team around us, and that everyone has a unique team, and children are very, like you said, it's very attractive to spirits. Like psychic, all children are psychic, some more than others. Just kind of are still close to the other realm. We still remember what it's like when we were over there. And if you're a psychic child, you just sort of like light up like the astral plane, like a little light bulb, and curious spirits will come in and try to get messages, or just like, oh, look at that beautiful little light over there. Look at Susan glowing like a little light bulb over there. And they come around and with curiosity. So I think part of the reason my house was so haunted was because I was a ghost magnet, like many psychic children are.
Do you think that ghosts are memories of things? Do you think they're people that are stuck? What is your opinion of that?
It's really like on an individual basis. So there's definitely times when it's stuck energy. That's called residual energy. And it happens when intense things happen, usually bad things happen in an environment. And that psychic energy, that physical energy of death sort of stays inside the environment. And we experience that as a residual haunting. So there's no actual spirit there, just the memory of the event, right? And the feelings of the event. And then sometimes there are actually spirits who, like the souls of humans who don't make it across. And sometimes it's they die suddenly, they die violent deaths, or they sort of die outside their own timeline. Like I feel like we have sort of a time when we're supposed to die. And if you die, but it's a crazy world and stuff happens down here randomly. And when we die outside of our time, we can get stuck. If we have a lot of unresolved issues, if we have tons of unresolved trauma, we remain, and that's really more of a ghost, like what we think of as a traditional ghost. And, I think you have to kind of take it on a case by case basis, because it can be all different, hauntings can be all different kinds of things.
Did you find a mentor then that could help you in this gift?
I had a few really amazing experiences, like God bless my hippie parents, who took me when I was 10 years old to transcendental meditation. Because they wanted to learn it. They were hippies. And I met Maharishi Yogi, which I had no idea who he was, but that's incredible, right? So my parents,
wow.
I know. My parents went to the temple and they brought me there. And Maharishi, I had no idea who he was. He was speaking to us through a translator, and he had to give this long speech. And then he brought everybody back to this back room, and he did like initiation, like Shaktipat, darshan, and would give you a mantra to do. And then he was talking to me through the translator, and he was kind of like, blah, 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 blah. And then he really looked at me and he was like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. You really have a gift. And, your childhood's just kind of suck. If you had been born in my country, we would know what to do with you. But because America is basically spiritually bankrupt, you're just out of luck. But you got to hang in there, because you're going to help a lot of people when you get older. And I was like, oh my God, like some adult noticed and said something to me. It was the first one. I remembered it forever. And then when I went to college and studied comparative religion, I figured out who he was. I was like, holy moly, that was Maharishi Yogi, the founder of Transcendental Meditation, who actually said that to me. Totally nuts. But it wasn't until the 1980s, I was in college. It was the dawn of the new age that I there were books, there were, workshops. And that's where I found a couple of really amazing teachers, a shaman. I studied shamanism when I was young, and a channeler, really taught me how to do the channeling thing. And also my hippie parents took me to, when I was in high school, to this thing back then it was called the Silva Mind Control. Now it's called the Silva Method. And it's fantastic training for psychics. So they teach you how to meditate. They talk about spirit guides. They talked about how to shift your brainwave into alpha state so that you can get psychic messages and intuition on demand, which is something that I use every day when I do session work. So I feel like even though there were some really serious challenges that I went through, I was also blessed with these like quite extraordinary, gifts of learning and mentors and teachers right really when I needed it.
Does your brother still talk with you?
Yeah. He does. He's one of my one of my best and favorite spirit guides, and I'm super grateful to have him around. Never feel lonely when you have that kind of connection with your spirit team.
Did you decide at a young age then, as you're going through these courses, to devote your life to this, or did that come later?
No, it came right away. And I started working as a professional psychic when I was 19. And I really have never done anything else. It's been except write books and stuff and be a mom. But that was it. And it really happened when I was probably like 12 or 13. And I went to the movies, and I went to see the movie Poltergeist in the movie theater. It came out. And there's this scene, where there's a professional psychic. And I was like looking at the screen like, oh my God, you can do that? I'm going to do that. And I just knew in that moment that's what I was going to do. And then she said this thing about like, what happens when you die and why some people get stuck and why her house was haunted, built on the, in a Native American burial ground. And I was like, oh my God, somebody knows something. Like she gave an explanation about what was going on. And it started sort of this lifelong love affair I have with paranormal TV, ghost stories, movies. Started seeing, I couldn't find any information. So I just started watching every ghost movie ever made so I could glean like little facts from it and try to figure out what was going on. And, because it's Hollywood, like maybe 25% of it was accurate and the rest of it was, Hollywood, entertainment stuff. So I got kind of as a child, a wonky paranormal education, but over time I figured it out.
Poltergeist is such an interesting film because there were the deaths around it.
Yes.
So wild. Did you experience other people in your family with this gift? Because I believe this sort of thing is genetic a lot of times. Did you find out later that you are in a line of others?
Absolutely. And definitely in the women in my family. I think all the women in my family are very canny, as my Irish grandmother called it. Tuned into, like super intuitive. They're all healers, therapists, and, drawn to the healing arts for sure. Mine gift was a little more extreme, partly, because of what happened with my brother. But I also feel like that happened on purpose to kind of give me the life purpose that I was meant to have. And I was like, when probably 6 years old, I used to make little books, like create books out of paper. And I remember writing in one saying when I grew up, I was going to be a psychic and an author, a psychic and a writer. And that's what I did. So I just feel like I was one of those people that came in really aware of what I was meant to do. Never had a minute of doubt about it, and have really always done it.
When your press people contacted me, I thought, why do I know this name? Why do I know this name? Your books are quite popular.
Yeah, they are. And my first book, The Art of Psychic Reiki, is really popular. That one came out in 2018, and it sold a lot. A lot of people have read it. It makes me really, really happy. I'm working on a new one now. I keep writing them. I sort of have a love-hate relationship with writing, but I always say, I guess I must love it more than I hate it because I keep doing it. Because I feel this drive to kind of impact more people, help more people. And so many people are undergoing psychic awakenings, psychic openings right now. It has to do, I think, with the shift in human consciousness that we're in. I think it has to do with just the general evolution of humanity. Every generation is more psychic than the one before. And then we do things like we do Reiki, we do yoga, we do meditation. Maybe we do some plant medicine. We like the tree frog or do some ayahuasca, and all of a sudden our mind expands. And even all the turmoil that we're in the world right now opens people psychically. You have like a near-death experience like I did, whether it's yourself or somebody close to you passes away, those things open us. And I see so many people, it's sort of one of my specialties actually, is working with people that are undergoing sudden psychic openings. they're psychic. They wake up one day and they're like, I'm like seeing things and there's a ghost in my room. And it's overwhelming and frightening to people who don't expect it or don't know what it is or don't believe it's possible, that's not really a thing. And I know how hard it was for me to go through that alone. And I feel really passionately about helping other people who are undergoing that to go through in a more graceful way than I did. If I can help people do that, that's a really good day for me.
Is your mom still with us?
She is. Yeah. She's 85 and she has Alzheimer's. So she lives in a care home. But she is still around. Yeah.
Did she, as she watched you come into your gifts, did she then acknowledge her own?
I think so. I feel like Dad was even more into that, like really into channeling, and he took classes, and then both my parents were meditators. My dad loved channeling and he would do it. And sometimes my mom would too. I feel like somehow my journey sparked theirs in a really beautiful way. So I really always felt so supported by my family. I was so lucky.
What do you make of the tumult that is in the world right now, especially the United States?
I feel like we're in a deconstruction cycle, and as painful and scary as it is, it's a natural part of the evolutionary process of life. Things grow, things are born, things grow, things die. Countries are born, countries grow, countries fall apart. And I think we're just in a cycle and I think it's a global cycle, where the old, we're in this massive, if you know anything about astrology, this massive like shift in the planets and kind of coming out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And all the old structures that we built don't work anymore. Like everything's broken. The government's broken, money's broken, healthcare's broken.
People are broken.
Our society is broken. And I think, I'm sorry to say, sort of irretrievably broken. And that this deconstruction is like the forest fire, that comes through and like burns the forest down and things grow. That's a natural part of what happens to all life. And my hope is that we can rebuild when it's time to do the rebuilding, which we already are starting, that we can rebuild at a higher level of beauty, harmony, and order, because that's also part of the evolutionary cycle.
I think, too, it's a time when people realize that they have taken much for granted of the beauty and the hope and the love and the this and the that and the support. And, we become numb to the world at large. And this is certainly a way to shake us awake, earthquake style.
Yes, forest fire style, earthquake style. And nobody likes it. It's super uncomfortable. We don't like change. We don't like to let go of it. It's a devil, And I think all us healer types that are here on the planet now are here to assist other people through the difficulty and fear of that change. And, of course, there's terrible things happening to people with war and weather and fires, literal forest fires. We don't like that. We don't, nobody wants to see anybody suffer, through that. And I think the healers are here to help. And I know, like, my kids are young adults, and I really believe that they're part of the reconstruction team, that they're going to build. I have a lot of hope for humanity when I look at young people. It makes me feel hopeful that they'll make better decisions about stewarding ourselves and caretaking the world. And I really think we have the technology, we have the resources to solve every problem. Nobody needs to be hungry. There's enough food, water, shelter, money for everyone on the planet. And if we would choose to do that, I don't know why we don't choose to do that, but we don't. And
ego, the leaders feeling like their power is never enough and that money is never enough. I think as long as that takes precedent over humanity, we won't get there. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And I still feel like I'm still hopeful that, the younger generations will redistribute the power. And if you look at history, when too much money and resources gets in the hands of too few people, there's always revolution.
Yeah. And Vive la France.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it's peaceful. Hopefully it's peaceful and calm, but I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know either. We, as they say, we live in interesting times. And on one hand, I can get pretty frothy about it. But then there's also this weird sense of calm that I have, and that is inexplicable because there's no reason I should be calm. And yet I have this grounded feeling about it. And whenever I get a lot of calls, a lot of texts and things from people, and they're upset and freaking out. And I always say the same thing. I said, stand up, fight for what you believe in. And that's the only thing I know what to say. Fight for what you believe in, whatever's in your heart, fight for that. And yet at the same time, I'm like, but it's going to be okay. Everything is burning down, but it's going to be okay. And that's such a weird thing going on in my brain about it. But it's not even my brain. It's like it's a knowing.
And I think for me, I experience that as what they call faith, not in a religious way, because I'm not particularly religious, but more faith is for me the feeling of or trust or belief that there's a pattern going on, a purpose that's way bigger than I'll ever be able to figure out. But the faith comes in that I trust that the universe is unfolding as it should. And even though it's painful, it's not wrong that we're in this breakdown cycle. And so for me, the faith is it's going to be all right. I'm in the same place you are. Somehow I really believe in humanity. I really believe in the resilience of humans and the basic goodness of people. Not everybody, and there are definitely some bad seeds in the world, and people have hard circumstances. They have to do hard things, but I still believe in the basic goodness of humanity, and that I think as humans we come together the best when we're really have our backs to the wall. I live in New England, and where I've always lived here, we're kind of an ornery bunch. We're kind of, especially compared to sunny California where everybody smiles at you. In New England, we're a bit more surly. But if stuff goes down, there's this feeling of everybody has God help anybody who ever tried to invade New England. That would not go well for them.
Oh, I don't think it would go well in California either. To be honest.
We have this sort of we're in this together. We have each other's backs. And I just feel like humanity is like that. Things get in the way of that, but really that's what's in our hearts. Coming together to help other people. And that gives me a lot of that faith in humanity. That's what I have, faith in humanity. And faith in the bigger pattern that I don't understand.
I mean, I love humans, but also I'm sick of our shit. Yeah, I'm both. I'm both those things. I mean, that's the duality of living, I suppose. Tell me about the Quantum Mystic Mystery School.
Yeah, so I teach. This is the first year I ran this. I did teach in a mystery school for 15 years. Well, that was more about training people to do healings. And then I started a mystery school with my friend Jane Bear. And it's really it's a consciousness program. So it's really there to help people raise their consciousness and become more aware, more awake. We use the chakra system as a lens to look at ourselves through and really see, look at our wounding, do a lot more healing, raise our vibration, raise our frequency. And old-timey psychic teachers call that clearing the channel. You have to get all your stuff out of the way so you can see clearly and see the world better. And that's really what we do. It's pretty cool. We also bring in a lot of sort of fifth dimensional elements, quantum healing. I've been a Reiki practitioner for 26 years now. I started learning and teaching Reiki in 1999. I've trained thousands of people in energy healing modalities since then. And I don't know, about 5 years ago, I started realizing when I was working with people, I wasn't doing Reiki, I was doing this other thing. And I'm like, what is that? It's quantum healing or fifth dimensional healing. It has a lot of different names, but old school Reiki is sort of like vibrational healing. So it's using vibration, whether you're talking about sound healing or Reiki or homeopathy or gems or crystals, all those things. And quantum healing is really working with light. So working with light frequencies, photonic light, and the healing is much, much quicker. And I think we called it the Quantum Mystic Mystery School to kind of tag into this idea of the acceleration of human consciousness that we're in. And I feel like as humans, we have an opportunity to vastly quantum leap our evolution by studying consciousness. And what is consciousness? How do we become more conscious? And doing all, our school is a lot of, the foundation is spiritual practice. So we really like rest on meditation techniques, encourage our students to meditate every day. That really helps with waking up fully, even more fully.
Are you in the camp that believes everyone has this ability, or the camp that believes not everyone has it?
Definitely in the camp of believing everybody. My third book is called Awakening Your Psychic Abilities. And I really think that psychic is an ability like musical ability and athletic ability. Everybody has some, and it's a matter of training and practice and how much time you're going to. Some people have more than others, but everybody has some. And when you look at professional psychics, it's like looking at a professional athlete or a professional musician. We know those people put their time in. They practice. That's what they do. And it's the same for psychic stuff and healers. So if you're willing to do that, you're willing to do the work of practice, anyone can do it.
Yeah, I'm in that camp as well. I believe that everybody has that gift. It's just like a muscle. You have to work it out. And it's I have this intuition of this thing, or, I thought of this person and they called. That's what that is. That's holding hands with the universe. And that's what I call it. It's being in the flow.
Yeah, totally good. I love that. It's beautiful. And so we have that intuitive sense is like our inner knowing, our inner knowing, connecting with our higher self and what we know to be true that is often at odds with what our mind tells us. Like you meet somebody and your mind's like, you should like that person. Everyone else likes that person. And your intuition's like, no. You can't trust that person. Like, and we all know what happens when we ignore our intuition, right? And then psychic ability is slightly different, just the way I define it. So psychic ability is when we get information from outside of ourselves. That means we're talking to angels, spirit guides, dead Uncle Fred. We're receiving downloads or connections or course corrections from our spirit team. I also think anyone can do that if they're willing to practice.
Dead Uncle Fred and the Downloads is my new band name. That's a great band name.
Totally. Yeah, I'm definitely coming to see you if you play that.
How do you teach others to protect themselves when they are dipping their toes into these types of ponds?
Super, super, super important, and one of my favorite topics. So when I was young, I studied martial arts, mostly because I wanted to, when I was little, I wanted to be a Jedi Knight.
I wanted to be a ninja.
Right? Of course you did. But mostly because I wanted to feel safe in the world. I love to travel. I wanted to walk about the world and feel safe and not be afraid. So I studied martial arts. It really worked. And I teach psychic self-defense the same way. It's kind of street smarts. There's a whole list of things you should not do, like that are going to put you in the line of fire. And and there's a list kind of like, how do we navigate psychic worlds with common sense and street smarts? And for the most part, like 80% of the time, what we're defending ourselves against is just the energy of other people. And Lord knows that's hard. The more sensitive you are, the more we are impacted by other people. Sometimes it's the spaces that we occupy. So because I love to travel, I'm, in the Murphy's Law, they put the psychic in the haunted Airbnb every single time. Haunted hotel room. They're like, hey, we have this hotel room for you. And do you mind there was a triple homicide there last week? Of course, they give that room to me. That actually happened to me once. So we need to, as we get more and more sensitive, we become more sensitive to the environments that we are in. And then sometimes we encounter spirits that don't have our best interests at heart, like what's in the haunted hotel room, and we just need a little spiritual kung fu for how do we handle that? It's really all about boundaries, setting boundaries. And once you know how to do that, it works with people, it works with energy, it works with spirits, it works with everything.
Yeah.
So this is a haunted hotel story. It happened not too long ago where, oh my God, I was staying in this hotel and I had this total premonition that I was like, I was hearing a woman screaming, and I like woke up out of bed in the middle of the night and I swear I heard this woman screaming. I was like all sweaty and shaky. And I was like, was there a woman in here? Is there like a dead woman in here? Am I hearing that? And then I couldn't settle down again. And then maybe like half an hour later, there was like a domestic violence incident down the hall from me, and that same scream happened. And they had to call the police and all that kind of thing. It was like, I felt like I was getting a little forewarning of that happening. I think precognition is very common. It's a very common psychic experience. And the most common precognition is death. We can sort of feel like someone's going to die. Sometimes pregnancy too. And to me, it's kind of like if you imagine a spider web a spider sitting at the center of a big spider web. These big events that sort of are coming, that kind of like create a disturbance in the force, if you will, tickle the outside edge of the spider web. And when we're in the center of it, we feel it. So I have a lot of precognitive experiences that can be a little unsettling.
Do you have that when major events, like say the fires here in LA or the floods that happened, in the South, or things like the tsunami way back in the 90s, stuff like that? Do you get signals?
Yes, I do. The biggest one I got was 9/11. 9/11, it was a big deal for everybody, but for me, living in Boston, it was a really big deal because those planes came from Boston and everybody knew somebody on those planes, And I would see, like, about 6 months before it happened, I would sit down to meditate, and I would get this like silhouette of a city, like a black cityscape with kind of like a red mushroom cloud around it. And I was like, is someone going to drop a nuclear bomb on a city? I was like, I kind of knew it was going to happen in September, but my birthday's in September and weird stuff always happens to me around my birthday. And I'm like, maybe I'm going to get divorced. I'm like, that bomb is going to drop on my life. I thought it was very personal. I was like, oh, that's me. I'm like, what's going to happen to me? And then when it actually happened, I was like, oh, now I understand. And I think a lot of times precognitive things, I always say I put them in sort of this imaginary file cabinet I have in my head called the X-Files. I just like put them in there because a lot of times we don't understand what we're seeing means until after it's happened.
Mm.
Yeah. Sometimes I've seen things that never happen that I was like, oh, something bad's going to happen. And then it doesn't. Does that mean it almost did? Does that mean it was some slightly alternative universe it did? Does it mean I was it just having a bad day? Like, precognition's tricky. So I tend not to worry about it too much. I write it in my journal and then I don't think about it again, unless it happens and I'm like, oh yeah, now I get it. Now I get what that was.
The Schumann resonance spiked the night of that, the night before that happened. It's so interesting to me, all the stories from that time. It's like little kids who are begging their parents not to go to work that day, or people that they missed their flights or missed their trains, or because they were just sort of dawdling and they didn't have any reason for dawdling. They just sort of were poking around, and that they're normally meticulous in their time. Those sorts of stories are fascinating to me. And I know that the naysayers just chalk it all up to coincidence. But I would argue that even those who hands down do not believe in this whatsoever have had moments of precognition or intuition in their life at some point, whether they call it that or not.
Everybody has everybody has those intuitive hits, and it can be like, I know people like who didn't get on the plane in Boston, like, too. So yeah, I think that event created such a large disturbance in the force. So many people got that download, but it doesn't have to be a big thing. Like, we have intuitive moments. The first time you meet somebody is a massive intuition moment. And I think like handshaking, especially if you touch the person, we receive like incredible amounts of intuitive information on first meetings, and that's why they say first impressions, like, because we're just so accurate at assessing people in what they say, like 9 seconds or some kind of ridiculously short amount of time. We've formed an incredibly accurate perception of somebody. That's straight up intuition. That's what that is.
I think it's a combination of that, and also we, without even realizing it, our brain is cataloging micro expressions off the other person. I don't like shaking hands. I'm not a big fan.
Yeah.
Or the people that meet and feel like they've known each other their whole lifetimes. I personally believe in reincarnation. I don't know what you believe, but I believe in that.
I think that's soulmates, like, and our soulmates there's never just one. It's kind of that silly Disney movie version of soulmates, but we have like a soul family, a soul tribe of many people that we've incarnated with over and over again. And when we meet them, we have that feeling of recognition, of like instant trust, instant bond, like, that's for real. And, sometimes those are really beautiful, supportive relationships. Sometimes they're really challenging relationships that are here to teach us, but they're always impactful and change your life in some way.
Yeah. What is your plan moving forward? How are you navigating the next few years?
It's a funny place, because like on a sort of material level, I feel like sort of simplifying and going back to nature. I'm like, maybe I should get chickens. Maybe I should, time to grow a garden.
Don't get the chickens right now. Wait till that bird flu is done. But yeah.
Truth. Yeah. So like kind of this, I'm like becoming like my parents, like back to the nature hippie type. And at the same time, I'm really expanding my dedication to impacting people, so writing more books, speaking at conferences. I'm speaking at a big conference in Colorado with some of the A-listers in my field, and feel really joyful about. I feel like there's like a group of people who are working together, kind of a soul group, who are here to help people who want to wake up, help people who want to, who need help, who need assistance with that. So it's sort of a funny place to be, where, the world is falling apart, but my personal life has never been better. That always happens to me when the world gets tricky. My phone rings off the hook because people need help.
Of course.
And I feel really here for that. Like that's what I'm here for, is to help. And I feel joyful about it. So it's a kind of a weird sort of cognitive dissonance that I carry. Like, is it okay to be happy and joyful when the world's falling apart? I mean, I think it is, but it's weird. It's a weird place to be. And I'm also pretty sure that the only thing I know, the only thing I can actually control is my own state of consciousness. And that if I stay in a high vibe and I'm happy and kind of holding the light down on the planet, that might be contributing more than I think it is.
Absolutely. Happiness has its own resonance.
Yeah.
For sure. Tell people how they can find you.
So you can find me at lisacampion.com if you want to check out my classes. I teach Reiki online. I teach all levels of psychic development, from beginner to intermediate to you want to go pro and be a pro psychic. And I have a great YouTube channel with lots of free stuff. You can find me on all the socials. My books are on every place, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, any place you can buy books.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have your books on my bookshelf, but they're all packed right now. So I'm like, why do I know her name? I'm like, oh my God, I have one of her books. It's such an interesting world.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the show and for talking about this. I'm always intrigued. It's, I was raised by somebody who's very science-minded and was very much anti this kind of thing his whole life. And the older he gets, I think he's hedging his bets. But we've had these great deep conversations about, as you say, the quantum world and how it is reflexive inside of I don't even like to use the word psychic because I think it turns a lot of people off. I like intuition, energetic, this sort of quantum, time is fluid, all of that. I think people absorb it a little bit better. Psychic has historically had she's a witch burner,
Totally.
And I can attest to the audience that Lisa does not have a carrot on her nose right now.
Nope, no carrot, no witch. I mean, I can be pretty witchy, but psychic can be a lot of triggering for a lot of people that have had religious upbringing, or a lot of scammers these days. It's like everyone's getting psychics who are trying to scam them on social media. It's kind of sad. So back when I first started, I never used that word. It was a big deal for me to publish a book with the word psychic in the title. I felt like I was really coming out of the closet and owning it. So.
Well, you bring up a good point. On TikTok, it seems like there are a bazillion astrologers and psychics. How does one, for the listening audience, how does one steer clear? How do they recognize the real versus the not real? Especially if everybody has it, right? We sort of, that's the push-pull. We say everybody's got this gift, but then not everybody has this gift. How does one assess?
I think it's such a good question, and really doing some research, making sure somebody has a website, like looking for reviews. Do they have testimonials? Getting word of mouth recommendation is, I think, the best bet that you have. Sad now, it happens to me like literally every day where somebody duplicates my accounts, my Facebook, Instagram accounts, and then DMs everybody saying they're me and offering readings for hardly any money. But if you send your money to that, you're never going to see it again. So the scammers have taken over the psychic world like crazy. And then there are a lot of like people who have really good intentions, but maybe not enough training, and need to get trained in some ethics. So nobody wants to hurt anybody, but they might if they don't have good enough training. So if you've got somebody who's like, well, I had my first psychic experience yesterday, but today I'm seeing clients, that's probably not cool. It's not like you can go to psychic university and get a degree, but
actually you can. There's one in England. It's called the Albert Finlay School.
Yeah, actually there are, and there are quite a few that have good, especially mediumship. But if you study with a reputable teacher, take a class on the Shift Network, or somewhere where they screen their faculty, and you're getting the good stuff. I teach there sometimes, which is really fun. So, I think you just have your wits about you and make sure that you're dealing with somebody that has a good reputation.
Yeah, because you can fall prey, certainly, because I think that there is people who are seeking out that kind of advice, they tend to be of the more vulnerable. Not everyone, but I think there is a swath of people who are certainly easily taken advantage of.
Yes. And that's historically been true way back in the day, even when the spiritualist movement started, and there were a lot of scammy charlatan psychics who are taking advantage of people who are, bereaved. And so I think we always just have our wits about us, like any other thing that we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for sharing your time and your talents.
Thank you, Susan, for having me on your podcast. I love your podcast.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much.
It's just so good. I just love your vibe and what you're doing in the world. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for listening, everybody. Bye. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on Apple, iHeart, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.